I made a little box enemy here for a hopefully quick tutorial on animation, bones, and armatures, weight painting in Blender. And I'm just going to keep it simple. This isn't a complicated model, so we're just going to go over the basics, and I'll stop in for some extra stuff for making it easier for making human-esque models as well. Now, first of all, starting out, you want to make sure that your mesh is organized so that it is going to allow for the animations that you want. So for me, this one's pretty simple. All I added was this line down the middle so that I can give a simple death animation here. And I'll show you how to take the extra pieces with you with doing the weight painting. But if this was a more complicated model, then I would definitely want to have some more cuts out here. For instance, if this was a finger, then since this is the bend point, I would want to have a couple more. But for this case, this is fine. This is just, it's bending at one point, and I don't really want too much curve into it. I just want to keep this model lean so that it isn't taking up too much. But we can go ahead and start on making the armature for the model from object mode. And out here we can just press Shift A, go to armature down here, generate a single bone, and we have the start of it up here. And I'm just going to go ahead and leave this bone here because we want a bone to be the origin point of everything else and have all the other bones go off of it so that we can control the whole model from that point. But first of all, it's going to be a little hard to see everything if we can't actually see the bones through the model. So if you go to the Object Properties panel, Viewport Display, you can select In Front to make sure that you are seeing the armature from wherever you are. And from here, another preparation for animation is making sure that you have all the bones in the right places, because, well, it works mechanically, you know, like a real life machine where you want things to be lined up so that they deform them correctly. So for that, I'm going to tab back into edit mode on this model over here. I'm going to press Shift S to change the cursor location, and I'm just going to put cursor to selected to put it in the center of my selection. And this is going to be rotating right along this line here. I mean, I could do it in the middle of them all, but this is just a really simple model. It's going to be small, so I think this is going to be fine. I can press, and I can go out of edit mode here, go back into edit mode for the bones, Shift A, and it generates me my second bone. And I can do the same thing, tab out, tab back in, make a selection here, Shift S, cursor to selected, tab out, tab back in, Shift A, and I have my second bone. Now it makes it easier, especially with a character, if you just mirror the bones over. For instance, if this was part of the main body and this was one of the arms, then you could make the bones for the arm, the left arm and the left leg, and then just mirror those over to the opposite side. And to do that, what I'm going to do is just, well, first of all, we want the cursor back to the origin point. And then instead of having the objects move along their individual origins, so if I rotate this, it's just going to rotate right there. If I select 3D cursor, then I can rotate things along the 3D cursor instead. So if I select this bone and then I Shift D to duplicate it, press RZ 180, I can get a perfect mirrored copy of it. And I'll just do the same thing to this one, Shift D, RZ 180, and I have that over there too. And we want the objects to go along what they are controlling. So I'm going to turn this back to the individual origins here. And then I'm just going to rotate each of these so that they are flat along their flaps. If I press RX 90, then it will do that for me. It is rotating along the x-axis here. You can see in the red, you can see all the letters here for the negative and positive number directions. So this way I would do RY 90 and then RX negative 90, RY negative 90. And now I have some nice bones going along each of the sides. I could, edit these to make sure that they are the right length. So GX, move that out there. GX, move that out there. And those ones look fine. Now, I need one more for the face bone, and I'm just going to do that from here, so I can move the cursor to that point and get another one. But then, if we go into pose mode here, where we can move the bones around, and we rotate this one, our point of origin, then nothing is following along it yet. What we need to do for that is we need to parent our bones to it. So if we tab back into edit mode, and we just go ahead and select all of the different bones and then the origin point last, we can Control P and parent it while keeping the offset. And now, when we go into pose mode, we can rotate this and everything moves along with it. Now, if this was a spine or arm, then we might have done things a little different. Another way you can do this is you can go over, and instead of moving the cursor around to all the different places, you can just press E and you can extrude it out. And that makes things a lot easier, as you might be able to imagine, for making arms and spines and things like that. And with that, if we go back into pose mode, you can see those are already parented, so we wouldn't have to worry about that. And they are parented sequentially, so each of these is still controlled by the earlier one, and that also makes animation quite a bit easier. But you still might have these bones extended out here, even on a human body, because, for instance, this might be the tailbone origin point, and then you wouldn't need another bone between, just in the thigh, not the thigh, but the hips. You wouldn't need an extra bone because there wouldn't be anything moving in there. So you could just start the bone at the top of the leg and extrude it downward to the feet. But since we have everything parented over now, I think we can go ahead and start on getting the armature connected to the mesh. And to do that, we are just going to do the same thing. Select the mesh, select the armature, press Control P, and we get a couple options here. And what I always go for is with automatic weights, because it connects things together, and it doesn't do it very well. For instance, right now, if we select this and go into pose mode, yes, then rotate this. It has a little more than it needs, and things aren't quite working very well yet, but we can fix that. We're going to have to go into weight paint mode anyway, and for that, it's going to make things a little easier if we give ourselves make Blender a little more relaxed on object modes. So if we go into Edit, down at the bottom here, click off Lock Object Modes, then we'll be able to select multiple objects at the same time. So in Pose mode here, we can select the armature, click it again, go into, not into Edit mode, go into Weight Paint mode. With our selected bone and our selected mesh, we can see the weights by by the color of it. Let me see, make that a little bigger. The weight here controls how much control it has over it. So if, for instance, I do that, you can see that red is 100% or 1 on the weight. So I might have the middle bone control all of the top, because you have to have controls on every single part of the mesh for the mesh to deform with it. So I'm just going to grab all of my extra ones that aren't going to be controlled by these side bones and throw them on my middle bone here. Now, if you press Shift and right-click, you can select the other bones, and you'll see that as we were generating these, they just made one name after the other automatically. And it's probably going to be a little easier if we go in and edit those names. If we go into Pose mode, select one of our bones, go over to the Bone Properties panel over here. We can see the names up here. So I'll go ahead and rename this base, and I'm just going to pause the recording while I go through and rename each of these individually. With all of these named now, we can go ahead and go back into Weight Paint mode, Shift right click, and you can see left, front, back, face. I think I forgot to rename the right one, maybe? Oh, no. You select it based on where it is, so if you do it in an area, then it's going to just take the closest ones. So if I select over here, then I can get the front in this one. And we want to I want this to control, let me see. I want it to control all of this at the end here, and none of this back here. So if I press that, set that to 0, then it zeroes out the weight in the And we can do the same thing for the other ones. But there's also another way of going about this. And if we go into object mode again, then let me see. Tab into edit mode. Then we have our bones named out here. So if we were, for instance, to select this face here, we could just assign that to the right bone, and then for all the rest of the mesh, we could remove it to make sure that there aren't any straggling weights that are it's influencing the rest of it with. And yeah, I'm going to go ahead and skip me doing that individually for all of the bones. You can ask me if you have any specific questions about things. All right, I think I got it, so I'll go ahead and go pose mode, get back into weight paint mode, and we can go through and check these manually if we want, or we can just go back into, let's get rid of this, go back into pose mode here, and we can move our different meshes. Yeah, so I didn't get this one all the way, but this one looks fine. We could limit this so that it wouldn't do weird things like this, but I'm just going to animate from the sides here, and it isn't going to pose a big issue for me. But I'll fix this and then get back. There we go. Doing weight painting is just a lot of going back and forth between weight painting and pose mode and making sure that things look okay for how they are deforming. And let me see, actually I forgot to test this one, so I will try it out. And yeah, the weight, I didn't quite give it enough weight. So I am going to go over here. I might have to troubleshoot this one. Let me see. Yeah. So they also share the weight that they have on them. So with this one not being able to control this portion of it, even though it has 100% on it, that means that another bone is encroaching on its territory. So I just have to go through here, go back into weight paint mode, and I can select the different bones to see, okay, maybe if I take this one out over here, then it will have an easier time. Or I can go to the front, the right, the left, the back. Yeah, it looks like it was just the base one there. So hopefully going back into pose mode here, this will function correctly. Now it's still influencing the top one there a little bit, so this bottom part is moving back more, but I sort of like the look of that, so I'm just going to leave it. And we have our model all set up, put together with the weights. So now we have to make sure that we don't mess everything up. And to do that, we are just going to replace each of these bones with something a little more visual that isn't going to that's going to help make it easier to separate out our editing and posing. And to do that, first we want a model to replace them with. So I'm just going to generate, let me see, Shift, get into object mode to be able to make things, and then Shift A, I will make I'm going to make let me see, a mesh, just make a circle. And for this, let me see, I don't need a whole ton of vertices. This isn't overly complicated. Maybe 4, 5. Once I have that, then I can go into edit mode for it. And actually, I'm going to tab out first, move it over here so I can actually see, and then tab into edit mode for it. And I'm going to duplicate again, Shift D, R, Y, 90. And then again, Shift D, R, Z, 90. So I have a little spherish thing going on here. It's going to make things easier to select. I'm just going to make this a little smaller because I don't need anything super big. And then I can just tab out, and I'm going to name this CO for control object circle. And I'm just going to make that invisible because it's just a placeholder. We are not going to really use it too much. Now what we are going to do here is, let me see. In the bone properties portion here on the viewport display, you can select custom objects to decide how things are shown. So if we select the circle here, then that is just going to transform right into a circle. And I'm actually going to do this one first because I'm going to make it the custom object, and then I'm going to go into the properties here, and I'm just going to make it a tiny bit bigger. Because we have these, okay, maybe a little bigger than that. Because we have these overlapping a little bit, and if we use the same object, then we aren't going to be able to see this other bone once we edit this one. So if we go back into it, do the circle for it, then you can see we can tell which one is which because we can actually see the difference. And we can go in individually for all of these, select them in edit mode to show which bone you are editing. Go tab back into object mode to be able to access this portion. Select the circle, tab back into edit mode, tab out, circle, edit mode, out, circle, circle. So now we have little controls for all these portions, but if we go into, well, actually we don't need to have multiple things anymore, and that's messing me up, so I'm going to get rid of that. But if we go into pose mode here, then it's still a little difficult to see the difference between these. We can make it a lot easier by doing a little editing here. So let's go back into object mode, and then doing a tutorial is messing me up a little bit. Bone groups. So if you go into the object data properties panel here for the bone groups, and you go into pose mode, then you can make a couple bone groups here for yourself. So I'm just going to make a base, a vertical, horizontal. That's probably not the best naming things, but because someone else might not understand what I'm doing, but it's fine. It's fine. We're just making a little tutorial here. Now, if we select the different portions, we can assign them to it. And actually, I'm going to remove that because that's just the flap. This is the face. This is the base one. We can assign those. And for vertical, I'm just going to take the ones along the middle here, assign those. Horizontal is going to be the side ones, so we can assign those. And then what we can do with this, once we have them all selected, is we can choose some colors here. And now we have them all nice and colored out, prepared for doing animation on them. And we can jump right into that. Going over to the animation one here. Actually, I'm going to save a copy of this first box. Bones. And now, let me see. First of all, we can go into the action editor, make a new action. Let's name this walk. And I don't think we are going to need 250 frames. I think 30 is a good one to go for. And for making animations, so I'm going to make this a loop animation. So first of all, I'm going to select all my bones here. I'm going to press I, and I'm going to do the whole character bone selected. And what that's going to do is it's going to save the bone location onto the let's go to the dope sheet here, onto the dope sheet here. And we want to be in the dope sheet to be able to access all the functions. And because I have that in one location, I can take these, Shift-D, duplicate them, and keep the entire same pose throughout the animation. But then I can go to other portions, and I can select, for instance, this base bone, because for walking, it's going to be moved front and back in the actual game engine, and the mesh, the armature itself, isn't going to move around any for this. So I'm just going to raise this middle one here and do a little hopping thing for the animation. So if I press G, Z, then I can move that up just a little bit. And if I press the auto keying here, then when I move that, it will automatically save down here. And I can Shift D to duplicate that, move it over again, and if I select it back here, Shift D, duplicate, I can put that in the middle. And actually, I might just move these over a little bit. If you select them and press G, then you can move them around. It's the same as the viewport. And then now when I press play, it just pops up a little bit. And that's just what I want, but I don't think this has quite enough. So if I go in here, with the principles of animation, the outer body follows the inner body. So a little earlier on, before we get to the apex of this rising, I'm going to move this down a little bit here, this one down a little bit here. Then let me see how that looks. Yeah, so with it just doing that, then it goes back to the same thing down here. So first of all, I want to Shift D, make another one right there. Then I want to copy this one to make sure that it is going down to the bottom afterward. So then we have those flapping up and down. Actually, let me see. This goes up. Yeah, I only have the left one selected here, so I have to do that again because I didn't have the forethought to select them both. Perfect. Now I'm just going to do the same thing with the front and the back parts. Now I can hide the armature so I can see the full animation, and I have a little hopping animation for it moving along the ground. But I mentioned a little death animation too. So what we can do is, well, we want to see the armature again, but then we can go back into the action editor, take the walk one, and we can copy that over. It goes to walk one, but I will just name this death. And if we select everything, we can see all our changes here. I'm just going to delete everything except the first one, because if we start this from around the same position as all our other animations, then we can have pretty smooth transitions between them, even if we don't make transition animations or have the engine interpolate between them. And for the death animation, what we can do is, it's a lot like just editing things in the viewport. So if I press G, X here, I can move that back, and I'm just going to do that over here a little bit. There, looks fine. GX, push that back. That's pretty sudden, it's quick, but I'm not going to worry too much about it. Actually, I'm going to push it back in, and then another thing with animation is kickback. It makes things look a lot more natural if you make them bounce back afterward. I'm just going to go ahead and move the whole model back a little bit too. We could do this in the engine, but it's easier to do it with the animation, just to give the whole model a little kickback for the animation. And I think that went a little too far. Put it back a little bit. That looks fine. But we can do the same thing again. The animation, we have death, and we can do an attack as well. So again, same thing. I'm just going to delete these other ones here and start it from the base line. And it's just the same stuff from here again. So I'm going to go ahead and cut it off here. And I will send things off in the chat in a second. Just go ahead and send me any questions if you have any. Again, this is just the basics. Some of you more familiar with Blender might know some better ways, but I'm just going for the simplest and most straightforward ways to do things here.